We begin with new allegations in a Minnesota voter fraud case that first came to light this summer. 2 people pleaded guilty in federal court to being paid to help register voters. In all, 500 to 600 fraudulent voter registration applications were submitted to election officials in offices in 13 Minnesota counties.
Want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
Hey. Why this beat so cold?
We will make America proud again. When you try to we will make America wealthy again. And yes, together, we will make America great again.
Another day, another one of exposing the corruption in broad daylight. And you don't even got to look it up. It's gotten so bad where you could just be on the internet, on your phone, on X, on Twitter, Facebook, and it just shows up in front of your face of the corruption in broad daylight. I mean, man, look, I wasn't even looking this up, and I'm seeing Minnesota fraud, voter fraud, all over my page. Look, you know, and I'm just scrolling. That's why I'm doing this video. I was just scrolling. And I said, look at this. Bombshell, voter fraud. I'm seeing Tim Walz, Tampon Tim. They ought to walk that governor out and he ought to be fully investigated. I'm telling you, man. There's a lot of people that need to be held accountable, man. The hell with a politician, the hell with a Democrat. You know, I tell you, you just can't make this up, man. And then look. There are new allegations in Minnesota voter fraud case that first came to light this summer. 2 people pleaded guilty in federal court to being paid to help registered voters. It's always somebody that's guilty. The ones that have been screaming to the top of their lungs recently, guilty. The ones that came out screaming to the top of their lungs that Trump did this, Trump did that, Trump. Guess what? Guilty. And now we seeing all kind of indictments. All kind of charges. Guilty. Unbelievable. Trump did this with the mortgage, with the real estate. And come to find out these people got multiple primary residences. They marking all kind of fraudulent stuff. I mean, it's just a disgrace with people, man. The ones that scream to the top of their lungs be the most guiltiest. And they draws stank. Draws is filthy as hell. I tell you. And we're going to keep exposing it in broad daylight. You got doggone right.
With new allegations in a Minnesota voter fraud case that first came to light this summer. 2 people pleaded guilty in federal court to being paid to help register voters. In all, 500 to 600 fraudulent voter registration applications.
You know, there's a lot of other people getting paid to do some other things too. Oh boy. Yeah, other things. Yeah, they're getting paid to do all kind of stuff, huh? Got paid protests, all kind of people getting paid off. Paid. Follow the money.
Were submitted to election officials in offices in 13 Minnesota counties. Esme Murphy has been following this case, and she joins us now. Esme?
Hi there, Frank. It was some sharp election workers in Carver County who realized the names and addresses on the voter registration forms did not match with any county residents.
They didn't match?
Prosecutors charged 2 people with 1 count each of voter registration fraud. According to the charging documents, the 2 were paid by an unnamed foundation to help register voters. The 2 defendants pled guilty this summer and have since moved out of state.
Hell.
The scope of the 2-year FBI and state investigation was not previously known.
And it's very significant that they said today it was 13 counties, between 500 and 600 fake voter registrations. And that's just from 2 of the independent contractors that worked with this group.
The investigation involved scouring hundreds of records.
On guidance from the FBI, the voter registration applications were mailed directly to the election lead, and instructions were shared to use gloves when handling the forms.
In testimony before the committee, Minnesota Secretary of State Steve Simon says the system designed to catch voter fraud worked.
This is a case about individuals who conspired to submit false voter registration applications. This is not a case about fraudulent votes. And this is ultimately a case of the system working.
How many were in the system is challenged.
Republican Committee Chair Kristen Robbins, who is running for governor, says she has additional concerns that the unnamed foundation that paid the two workers is funded by state taxpayer dollars.
99% of their budget comes from state grants. So this is a group that the state is funding and that then went out and did these voter registrations.
Now, the hearing left a lot of people, including us, with a lot of questions that were not answered. One of the big ones, the 12 other counties where the fraud was discovered are not being named.
Oh, hell. I tell you can't make this up, family. And I seen what's the name report on this. Where the hell that video at? You know, because you just can't make this up. You know, you just can't. You know, broad daylight.
Documents, the two were paid by an unnamed foundation to help register voters. The two defendants pled guilty this summer and have since moved out of state. The scope of the 2-year FBI and state investigation was not previously known.
And it's very sick that worked with
FBI, the voter glove.
About individual, not a case about fraudulent votes.
Guilty.
And
Fraud was discovered are not being named.
Now, y'all, I want to point out that Minnesota officials have a vested interest with election season coming up, okay? They have a vested interest in calming the people's apprehension about the voting system. You're looking at two guys on your screen, well, they were just on your screen a second ago, who are running to be the Minneapolis mayor. Voting is coming up in less than a month. So Minnesota wants to say to the constituency, they want to say, hey, y'all, our voting system is secure. Don't you worry. But is it really? I don't know. Okay. There are people who have questions about that, considering there's voting fraud going on.
this is not a case about fraudulent votes. And this is ultimately a case of the system working to detect these applications so they could be appropriately challenged and referred to law enforcement for prosecution and conviction.
But we wondered, what about now? DFL and GOP members of the committee disagree.
Any new evidence of fraud at this point that you guys have been able to find?
Guilty, guilty, guilty. The president came out and said they was guilty, they was guilty, they was guilty. There's somebody doing something and they are guilty. And come to find out, Trump was right about everything. MAGA, conservatives, right about everything. Some of them conspiracy theorists, conspiracy facts. You know? But we call it out and hey, you know how that outcome goes, you know? A disgrace, man. And I tell you, they ought to go down there in Minnesota and just do a complete sweep. I've been advocating for it for a long time.
You know, we have not seen it, but I'm very concerned that the foundation in question gets their entire budget from state and federal grants. That to me is of concern, and that's something that I hope to talk to the Department of Health about and other departments that are their grantors.
Is there any new evidence of fraud, new cases at all that you all have found?
I mean, in this committee? Well, I will say the press, we've had a couple folks come in that the press had identified, nothing through this committee process at all.
Now, Kristen Robbins, the chair of that committee, says she still sees some red flags out here. She would like the Secretary of State's office to do more vetting before those applications are passed on to those local county elections offices. From the state capitol, Richard Reeve, 5 Eyewitness News.
Right. Now, in case you are not keeping score, in recent weeks and months, we have talked about Medicaid fraud, autism center fraud, feeding our future fraud. There's a 22-year-old Minnesota man who fraudulently passed himself off as a 17-year-old, enrolled in high school and got a girlfriend and went to prom. There's that. You got that kind of fraud. Now we have election fraud. Now, the Ilhan Omar voter fraud story, that's from a few years ago, so we're going to get to that in a second, okay? Because that never really went anywhere, but I will show it to you because it's kind of relevant. But first, what about Tim Walz? What about the fact that he signed into legislation that anybody in Minnesota who can pass their driver's education course can get a license? Doesn't matter if you have permission to be in the United States or not. And remember, don't you register to vote when you go get your driver's license? Again, I don't know about your state. In my state, you do. So what about that, Tim Walz?
Today, Governor Tim Walz signed the Driver's License for All bill into law. This will allow all Minnesotans to get a driver's license regardless of immigration status, as long as they pass their written and practical tests. Advocates say this law will change lives for the better.
For almost exactly 20 years, Minnesota has put in place a piece of legislation that came in the fallout of the September 11th attacks. A piece of legislation that did nothing to improve public safety, but caused great personal harm, great community harm, and great economic harm to our state. That policy of denying driver's licenses to folks who were doing all kinds of jobs across Minnesota, of folks who were all kinds of people to someone else. Sister, brother, husband, wife, mother, father, grandmother, aunts, uncles, friends, people that are here in Minnesota. All of us acknowledge we need the federal government to be good partners and get.
We dodged a nuclear missile. This was actually on the damn ballot.
True reform so the folks that want to call Minnesota home and want to be here, we welcome them, want them here, and want to make that process easier for them.
So notice, y'all, the driver's license situation, the driver's licenses for everybody in Minnesota, that is not even directly connected to these allegations of voter fraud. I think that's why the officials are like, yo, we don't even know. Like, everybody can get a driver's license. Again, if you register, let me see. I just did a quick chat GPT on it. It does say, and you have to double check this, but it does say in Minnesota at the DMV, they do the voter registration. It's called automatic voter registration. You can look that up and verify the information on your own, okay? But it does seem like a system that's ripe to be abused. And we see that it's ripe to be abused from multiple angles of attack, because the driver's license for all is one, but the story we just showed you is a whole nother angle of attack on the voter system. And now, y'all, to put the icing on the cake, let's go ahead and get a little bit of information about your girl and her previous voter fraud allegations. Let's take a look.
President Trump is calling for an investigation of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar after a right-wing group known for its controversial videos claims that it has evidence of voter harvesting linked to Omar. Two Minnesota House GOP leaders are also asking Minnesota's Secretary of State to investigate. President Trump is calling for an investigation of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. The video was released last night, and the president repeatedly tweeted about it.
The Project Veritas video shows a man driving around Minneapolis with what he says are absentee ballots for then city council candidate Jamal Osman. The video then presents community activist Omar Jamal claiming, without offering any proof, that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is paying for harvesting of ballots.
She uses money, and he's one of many people.
Put that heifer in jail, prison,
In a statement, Congresswoman Omar,
foreign agent, I tell you, take her butt back to Somalia, deport this heifer, revoke her citizenship. You know, I believe it. I tell you, brother loving, immigration fraud, just a complete fraud. And then got the nerve to and want to get up and bash Charlie Kirk after he died, and then want to get up and tell us we must fear white people, white Americans. I'm sick of this heifer. I really am. And that America's a disgrace and the country is destroyed because of President Trump. I'm sick of this anti-American a foreign agent. Shouldn't even be nowhere near the office, nowhere near Congress. They need to revoke this heifer and deport this heifer, in my opinion.
Omar denies the man in the video works for her and says there is zero truth to the Project Veritas claims. Overnight, President Trump tweeted out the video, writing, "This is totally illegal. Hope that the U.S. Attorney in Minnesota has this and other of her many misdeeds under serious review. If not, why not? We will win Minnesota because of her and law enforcement. Save Minneapolis and Iron O Range. Congresswoman Omar fired back, retweeting the president's tweet with a gift from a TV show revealing $750. The amount a New York Times story just hours earlier alleged that the president had paid in taxes in 2016 and 2017. And then there's this.
Minnesota election laws, which prohibit free ballots.
In fact, for the August primary, this court order allowed anyone with the proper identification and the proper information to submit an unlimited amount of absentee ballots. The 3-person limit has been reinstated for the general election. Esme Murphy, WCCO 4 News.
Minneapolis police are looking into the validity of this case. Call us back. He didn't.
I'm just showing you that because, again, as I was starting this video, I'm like, because I'm using Ilhan Omar and Omar Fateh as B-roll, and I'm talking about voter fraud, and then in my mind just pops, hold up, weren't there some allegations about Ilhan Omar in that? So there you see it, but again, I don't think anything ever came of it, so it is what it is. Anyway, y'all, why?
A disgrace, man. An absolute disgrace. You know, read the comments. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Fraudsters commit fraud. Wake me up when someone is held accountable. So nobody in Minnesota is being elected legitimately. This explains everything. No illegal should ever be allowed a driver license or any other U.S. or state government identification. The only right these people have is the right to be deported immediately after photos and fingerprints are taken when captured. Shout out to Bob Morgan for that beautiful comment. Shout out to them Patriots, man. We just sick and tired. You know, we just want common sense and accountability. That's it. You know? Why do all these cases of voter fraud only benefit one party? What a beautiful comment right there. There is massive voter fraud in Minnesota. Has been for years. Like we've been saying. You know, voter fraud, marriage fraud, and she's still walking freely. They've been cheating for years. Absolutely disgusting. Yeah, just can't make it up, man. You know, you just can't. We've been calling this out for so long, man. There it is, y'all. There it is. You just can't make it up.